Spencer Jakab, ahead of the tape columnist. Guys having a private conversation over there with Tommy Kilgore. We need you here, Spencer. All right, let's talk about, we touched on manufacturing a second ago. Let's get into a big aspect of it, which is autos. Automakers report their sales, their monthly sales today, right?
That's right, yeah. They trickle out throughout the day.
Right.
So we've had a few numbers.
Chrysler this morning.
We had Chrysler, we had Ford, we had GM, so the big three, and then they, by 3 or 4 in the afternoon, we're going to see all the numbers, and they're looking pretty good. They're looking so good, in fact, that probably last month, finally, we surpassed the Cashel Clunkers number. That was, in August 2009, you had a little over 14 million vehicles sold on an annualized basis. They annualize all these months. Some months are better and longer than others, which is a pretty good stat. It means that we haven't come back to the heady boom days when we were hitting numbers over 17 million some months, but it's better. It's the best that we've been since the.
I mean, you would think if we maintained a level like that, the auto companies could be nicely profitable.
They can. I mean,
you know
what they did? They took out so much in cost. First of all, GM and Chrysler wiped out a lot of debts. But all three, and then all their suppliers also took out a lot of costs. So they can be very nicely profitable even at 12.5 million. And 12.5, that's a key number, because 12.5 is where the auto fleet doesn't get any older. You had several months where the fleet was shrinking, basically, where you had cars getting older. And the average car on the road is about 11 years old, almost 11 years old. Now you're starting to replace them faster, and it's pent-up demand. But that's the key thing. That's what I wrote up by column.
Any take on the recent consumer credit numbers? There's been a huge surge the last 2 months in consumer credit, which seems to feed into the auto sales. If you're borrowing a lot, you're likely buying durables, cars, for instance. That trend going to be difficult to maintain, and then of course car sales be difficult to maintain?
Almost every single month you've seen the average FICO score of people taking out car loans decline. And what the companies, the banks and other finance companies that make car loans found is that people were much less likely to default on a car loan, even a subprime type borrower, than they were on their mortgage. They paid their credit cards, they paid their car loans. They didn't want their, they needed their wheels, but the mortgages they were a little, little looser about, and they don't get their homes repossessed or foreclosed on as quickly, and that's probably why. And so they feel a little safer after having been through this crisis, going, diving deeper into the credit pool. GM even bought what really is a subprime auto lender.
That's an interesting point.
All right, so the bottom line is 14 million annualized, good number. Is it sustainable?
I doubt that it's sustainable for the full year. As a matter of fact, will likely be something like 13 million or even below. Some people are seeing numbers below that because there are a few trends. One is that you had a lot of pent-up demand, people who wanted to buy a Japanese car, and because of the tsunami last March, you had pretty poor selection, pretty high prices for certain Japanese models, and they're catching up. And there's an analyst at Credit Suisse who actually tries to quantify that effect, and he said that in January, which was a great month, the annualized number was about 1 million higher just because of people catching up and buying those Japanese cars that weren't available. And every month going into the spring, it's going to be declining until it goes away. Another thing is that the weather was really, really good in February and in January.
And
if it's not snowy, if it's snowy, you're not going to go to a car dealership and go for a test drive, and so that pulled forward demand too. And that, I bet you'll see in 2-3 months for a lot of other indicators that trucking and all kinds of things that pull demand forward, and then you're going to see a bit of a lag in some indicators, and people are going to be surprised. And it's going to be the weather was so good, construction too.
All right.